Now, you can bet your life the RBA was watching the unemployment rate today. It's lower, 3.6%, as we've said. But it's good news that 14.1 million Australians have jobs. Without them, their cost of living pressures would be insurmountable. But the feeling now is that the economic strength opens the door for the Reserve Bank to raise rates again in November in its fight against inflation. So, good news or bad? Joining me, Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. Angus, always good to have you on the program. It's delicate at the moment for people. They're hanging in there because they've got their jobs. But as we've just heard from David Rumban, his outlook is pretty pessimistic. I mean, is that your own assessment of where our economy's headed now?
Well, it's definitely a tough situation. I mean, it is good news, Ross, the strong employment numbers that we saw when we were in government coming out of COVID have continued. But of course, the real challenge is that we've seen a real collapse in real wages for a typical working family. In fact, 6% backwards in the last 12 months. Productivity down 6.7% in the last 5 quarters, labour productivity. We've never seen anything like that. And of course, GDP per capita has been going backwards now for 2 quarters. So that's a GDP per capita recession. And people are really feeling that pain. I mean, that's something I see as a Member of Parliament out on the ground every single day. Australians have lost a lot of purchasing power from their pay packets, and they're feeling it, and they're doing what they have to do to get by. Australians are stoic, but they're making the calls. They've had to work extra hours, take on extra jobs, make sacrifices that they otherwise wouldn't have ever wanted to make, but they're having to do that to make their mortgage payments, pay their insurance, if indeed they're continuing to buy their insurance. And many trade-offs that Australian families are committing to. They want to see an improvement in the situation. I have to say, I mean, my concern here throughout has been we've had a government that's been distracted and focused on other things.
I was going to ask you about that.
Can do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that situation. Do you sense that the Voice diverted the government from the notion of cost of living? It says, if it was sitting here, it would say, hey, we've given payments out, we've focused on it, we've tried to take some pressure off. But do you sense the Voice distracted this government?
Oh, let's put it into perspective. I mean, the best they've done is throw around $23 billion they're telling us about. That's 1% of GDP. Well, CPI increases have been 6%. Ross, you know, Middle Australia is not feeling any of the benefits of what they've done because, in fact, what you've got to do with inflation, what you've got to do when you're losing purchasing power from your pay packets is you have to focus on the source of the problem. No point dealing with the symptoms. You've got to focus on the source. Everyone is feeling this pain. And if you deal with the source of the problem, everyone benefits. That means having really sensible spending policies. We've seen an extra $188 billion of spending, $450 million for this referendum. You've got to have competition policy that's not knocking players out of the market, as we've seen in the airlines market. You want more supply, not less, if you're going to drive down prices. Industrial relations. You don't want to interpose union officials between deals that are being done between employers and employees to make a workplace more productive and indeed give workers higher real wages. So these are the sorts of areas where governments with the right focus can really make a difference. They can put your purchasing power back into your pay packet, but we haven't seen that over recent months.
OK, so then you take the point that there were 500,000 new migrants come to this country last year. There could be another 500,000 come this year. Now, so far, those people have been absorbed into our ranks of employed people. The question is, how long can that last before the unemployment rate starts to rise? And really, that starts to put real pressure on pay packets as soon as that happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is the exact point. I mean, the only thing growing the economy now is population growth. You don't want that to be your source of growth. You want productivity to be your source of growth. But right now, GDP per capita is going backwards, which tells us that it's only population growing the economy.
OK, so Angus Taylor,
that is not the economy we want.
OK, so Angus Taylor, should they right now ease back on the numbers of new migrants being allowed into the country to take some pressure off that?
Well, the first thing they should do is try and get GDP per capita up. That's the first thing they should do. And all those things I've just talked about are all the sorts of measures that will help to achieve that, Ross. And that's got to be the focus for the government. Look, it is true that these are very, very big numbers, and I think there are very reasonable questions about whether we're going to be able to absorb them. The housing market is at breaking point. There's no question about that. And whilst many expected house prices to be careering downwards at the moment, they haven't been. And shortage of supply has been a significant part of that.
Okay.
And there's no question now that it's getting to the point where many younger Australians in particular are losing the aspiration of owning a home, not because they don't want to, but because they can't. So these are very real pressures. The starting point, though, let's get productivity up. Let's get GDP per capita up.
And Angus, I've got to leave it there. Many thanks for your time, as always.
Good on you.